Hello everyone, my name is Tim, and today I wanted to talk about a topic I wanted to talk about for a longer time now, and this is the cinema snapping tool. For me, my background, I've worked with cinema for about 20 years now, and half of that professionally. And at first I was only in motion graphics, and about 5 or 6 years ago I switched to architecture visualization, and with that I switched to 3D Studio Max. And after switching to Max and having to model a lot of things for ArchViz, I discovered that 3D Studio Max has a very nice snapping tool. And after a while I fired up Cinema again and tried a bit around, and I couldn't get the snapping tool to work. And I was a bit confused. And I thought, maybe I forgot something, or I don't know. I left it with that. And about 2 or 3 years ago, I started teaching Cinema 4D to architecture students. And one of the first questions I was always asked is, how can I snap an edge to a point? Or how can I snap in general? And at first I had to say, I don't know. Here is the snapping tool. You can activate it by pressing Shift and S, but I don't really understand how it works. And the students looked at me and didn't understand me, because how could you not know how to use a snapping tool? After that I started to search the internet for tutorials, but I couldn't find good tutorials on the snapping tool in Cinema. And then I started to read the manual, but I couldn't get the hang of it. And then I started a bit of experimenting, and this is the topic of today's video: why the snapping in Cinema 4D is not good. At first I want to show you how the snapping works in other programs. I'm going to show it in 3D Studio Max and in Blender. And in Max you just select your object, you activate your snapping. The most important thing is to activate X constraint snapping, and after that you can just select a polygon, move it around, and then you have to move your mouse over the point you want to snap to, and it will snap to it. You can even do this while extruding. You can only extrude edges in Max, so you have to press Shift, then you move your mouse and you move it over the point you want to snap to. It's really simple, and it's such a big time saver if you want to model a house or something else, because you always want to have right angles, because this makes extruding much easier. And if you want to add other points, it's just such a time saver. So this is how a snapping tool should work. So same in Blender. You can open up Blender, you have to activate the snap, then you have to switch to vertex snap. Blender's snap is not as advanced as the one in 3D Studio Max, but it is sufficient. You go into your object, you select a polygon you want to move, you move it, you hover your mouse over the point you want to snap to, and it moves the polygon to the place it should be. You can even do it with extrude tools, and it's very convenient to model in such a way. And this is why I was confused why it didn't work that way in Cinema. So let's take a closer look how Cinema snapping tool works in general. For this I want to create 2 cubes. You can invert them. And then you go to mode. Modeling. Okay, so let's see, how does the snapping in Cinema work. For this we will firstly look at the 2D snapping mode. And now I want to snap this point to this here. So I have to activate the snapping tool, After that, I have auto snapping, I have vertex snap, and I have edge snap available, activated. So I select my points, I move them on an axis, and if my pivot point runs over an edge node or a point, it will automatically snap to it. And you see the two little gray lines near it, that's the snapping radius. If you go to mode, modeling, you can set the snapping radius. If you put it to 50, you have a much bigger snapping radius. But if you make it too big, you will have problems getting the right points to snap to. So we will leave it at 10. And here's the problem. If I try to use the point snapping tool now, I want to snap them to this point, I will move, and now my radius hits. The way the snapping in Cinema works is that it is dependable on your viewport, and it only takes into consideration your current viewport and zoom level. So if I zoom in, the point got much smaller, or it only works in a smaller area. If I zoom out, the snapping point will get much bigger. So here I have problems because it can't really hit the right point I want to snap to. And this is something you need to know, and here it can get a bit annoying, because the same principle applies if we switch to 3D view. So you have to remember the snapping only occurs on your pivot. So where your pivot is, it will snap. And now we will activate the edge snap, and if we move our selection over, it will snap to this edge. But the problem is, it didn't snap to the edge's position, it snapped to where the edge is in our current viewport. So you move it, it snaps, and you see this gap here. And this is because the pivot ran over the edge where it was not in a 3D place but in a 2D place. And it gets the 2D coordinates of the 3D object. And this practically makes the snapping in 3D in Cinema 4D useless. To make it a bit more clear, if you have your selection, you can move the selection's pivot. First you press L, then you go into pivot mode, you move your pivot a bit more forward, then you press L again. To move out of the pivot mode, you press E for snapping. And if we want to snap our edge point selection to the edge, we move it, there it snaps. And now the gap is even bigger. And this is the biggest flaw in Cinema Snapping Tool, because it doesn't take the 3D position of our line into consideration. So how do we work around this? If I want to snap this cube onto this cube, what I can do is go into object mode, I press L. For pivot mode, I press E, then I press into a blank space, and then I have the origin of the pivot always on my mouse. I can move it onto an edge point, I can press L again, and now I can move it, pull it here. And if I want to align the faces along, I move it to this edge. Here you see you can use a snapping tool to align objects, that you have to do a lot of key presses. You have to press L first, then you have to click and move your mouse, then you have to press L again, and then you have to press E. So this is about 5 actions just to do some basic snapping. And remember how easy it was to use in the other programs. For example, if we switch to Max again, we get out of it. I hope it works now. And I go over the point I want to snap to, and I move it to the edge, and it snaps. Easy as that. And in Cinema I have to do about 5 key presses, so you see it's very annoying to snap in Cinema. How do you work around this? You always have to remember that the snapping tool has this 2D limitation, and best use for the snapping tool is in 2D view. So you only use it in top view or in side view, because here you can easily snap and it will fit. You use it. Here it works because here it can only take the 2D plane into consideration. But what if I want to snap to another point that is over here? I could switch the view. Which one is it? Here. I could switch in the side view and could see if I can get the right point. I would have to move my pivot again. So pressing L, moving it over here, pressing L again, and then I can move and snap it to this. And I looked really hard, and I searched a lot of forums, I looked on Reddit. I couldn't find how to do an X-constraint snapping. X-constraint snapping is if you move your points by one axis, so they are constrained to one axis, and you just snap it to one point. And today, after a long time of searching, somebody posted something on Facebook. I think his name was Thomas or something like that, and thank you for the tip. But I couldn't find it in the manual, and for all the other people that are having a hard time with Cinema Snap and don't know, there is an X-constraint snapping, but it's very hidden. And for that, you have to be in move mode, and you just have to press Shift, and you have to be furthest away from the axis you want to snap. So if you want to snap the Z-axis, you have to be far away from the Z-axis. You have to press Shift, and then you click, and then you move. So you get the X-constraint. But how do you snap? Here is the other thing you have to take into consideration. Remember, the snapping radius, which always is around our mouse and only takes the 2D view into consideration. You have to align that first. So we want to snap this axis to this, and we don't want to press L and all the other keys. So you have to align your mouse above the axis you want to snap. Here you can see the snapping radius works. So I have to be furthest away from the Z-axis, so it only takes the Z-axis into consideration for the constraint snapping. You have to click, you have to move your mouse, and then you pull it down, and there you have your X-constraint snapping. I've been looking for this feature for 3 or 4 years, and here it is. And you see how complicated it is. See here? I was only furthest away on the X-axis, not on the Z-axis, so it did constraint snapping on the X-axis. So put it down, looks that you're furthest away from the Z-axis, press Shift, left click, move, and you can do a constraint snapping. And this is one of the biggest flaws in Cinema if you're from an architecture background, because you have to have a reliable snapping tool. Otherwise, working is not fun. And it's such a pain in the to do it with the normal tools. You need a good snapping tool. And yeah, I don't know why it is so complicated. Even with the new tools, with the new sneak peek, with a dynamic placement tool, which looks awesome. I don't know why Cinema snapping tool is so complicated. The X constraint snapping, I wouldn't even get it to work in 3D, because you have the same limitation again with the viewport snapping. Here you can see it is not really snapping to the edge, it is snapping to the radius of the edge, and I don't get a clean snap. I don't understand how somebody could think that this is a workable tool. This is annoying as hell. Here you can see I can barely see where I'm snapping to, because if I press Shift, I get an offset on the pivot. And it is impossible for me to guess where it will be. And here it is changing between two edges. Why are you doing this, Cinema? So, yeah, this was my little rant. Maybe somebody knows a better solution how to get a consistable X constraint snapping, which is super useful for modeling and architecture visualization, so you don't have to press L, E, move, L, and then you're able to snap, because this is not feasible for a long production day. Yeah, for everybody else, the constraint snapping in 2D view works okay. It's not as good as in the other programs. I hope Maxon will deliver on this tool, because it is very essential. And yeah, this was it for today. This was my little rant, and I hope one day Cinema will have a nice snapping tool. But until then, we have to use the tools that are available to us. So thank you for watching, maybe you learned a bit, and see you maybe next time.